This is my 2004 Outback. So now, you may be wondering, why'd you buy a 2004 Outback? That's a great question, and you'll have to stay tuned on the channel to find out. Today we're going to be pulling the engine and transmission out of it, and the wiring harness, for a future project. We may see it before the Beetle gets done, we may not. I'm hoping the Beetle gets done before we start that project. If you can scroll back in the history of my channel, you'll probably figure out what the project is. But for those of you who don't and aren't going to scroll, you'll have to stay tuned and find out what all this is for. So now I've already gone ahead and done most of the prep work in order to get the engine out off camera, only because I didn't have the camera with me, and we only got a limited amount of time in the shop in order to get this done. So that's why in a lot of these videos, if you see a big jump or if there's stuff missing, it's a lot of times I'm working with what I got. So I'll kind of go through and show you guys what I have done and walk you through the process, so that way if you're trying to follow along to figure out how to pull your own, you should be able to kind of figure it out through the explanation here. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so hopefully you can see the whole engine bay here. Big number one thing was get the radiator out. I'm gonna see if I can move you down a little more so that way you can see. So right where these bolt locations are is where your radiator mount brackets sit. They're gonna be right in here. Pop these two out, pull it off. You're gonna have a couple of sensors down here on the bottom that go to each of the fans. Pop those off. The whole unit, as long as you've drained the coolant and pulled the upper radiator hose, which is going to go from here, and the lower, which is going to your thermostat down below, the whole radiator will come out in one piece with the two fans on it and your overflow tank. Next, you should have plenty of room for the front of your engine. You'll have two covers. You'll have a cover over here over your AC compressor, and you'll have a cover going kind of over the power steering, over the crankshaft pulley here. Remove those. They should be 10 or 12 millimeter bolts, and they'll be pretty easy to spot, and they kind of go on the brackets for the alternator and stuff like that. And then you'll be able to pull your belts off. So right here's the tensioner. This is off of the alternator bracket. You're going to loosen this one up here, and then just either put an impact or a ratchet, loosen this up. You'll be able to pull your belt off of your crankshaft, your alternator, and your power steering pump. On the compressor side here, there'll be another tensioner, which will look like this right here. So these two bolt holes go to these two bolts right here. And they come up like so. You're gonna loosen this pulley here, and then you'll put a ratchet or an impact on the bolt here and loosen that up, and you'll be able to pull your belt off of the AC compressor and then the backside of the crankshaft. That leaves you then with having to pull your compressor and your power steering pump. You'll want to hook it up to an AC machine and fully discharge all of the Freon that's inside, so that way you're not exposing that to atmosphere when you open it. This is your hard line for your power steering, and the soft one going to the power steering reservoir there. Take those off, So you don't have to remove the alternator in order to remove these two. I did to make it a little easier. It's easier to kind of get to the mount brackets here by taking off these bolts and then removing it off of the bracket. But if not, the AC compressor is held on by 3 bolts. You got these 2 here, you got 1 down here. Pull these out all the way, it'll slide out. On the power steering side, if you don't want to remove the bracket, so here's your power steering pump. As you can see, there's holes in your pulley. So if you rotate the pulley with the belt off, you'll be able to get an impact, a socket, wrench, whatever, on your bolt there. Pull those 2 out. Then if you see this bottom hole here, there'll be a bolt coming from the back side right here. Pull that out and you'll be able to pry it off with the pry bar up and out. It is easier, in my opinion, if you just take the bracket off. So you got a 12mm bolt here, you got a 12mm bolt on the other side, and then you've got one 12mm bolt going into the engine block down below here. Take the whole thing off, remove your power steering pump that way. Next, you got your main harness here going to the engine. They're all kind of put on this bracket right here. Let me grab a light. So they're all kind of on this bracket on the back of the engine, right above your bell housing. Disconnect all those, tuck that away, so that way they're kind of out of the way. So being a 2004, this is a drive-by cable, so you'll have to disconnect your throttle cable here. There's a bracket right here. It's easier rather than trying to take the bolts out of the bracket. Just take the bracket off of the intake here, and then these you'll just push to the side and pull out. Pretty simple. Next, I'm going to remove the starter. I'm going to remove this, I think it's a ground cable here. We're going to take that off. Looks to me like it's a 12. Alright, so now the starter's out. There's 2 bolts. There's one on the top here, there's one on the bottom. Both 14 mil. You got a 12 mil nut here holding the power cable going to the up to the battery. And then I'm assuming there's probably a ground right there, or some sort of sensor. But pretty easy, comes right up. All right, so it's out. I'm probably gonna get power steering on. What's the next step? We gotta take the wiring harness out and the ECU, so we'll be able to power that thing outside of the vehicle. And we're gonna pull this transmission out. I already have a transmission that's supposedly good, but you know, can't trust sellers on Facebook. This one is going bad, but I'm gonna take it apart and we're gonna see what exactly is going wrong with it, and maybe if we maybe we can fix it in the future and use this one instead of the other one. It all depends on which one looks better. I don't know what the mileage was on the other one, but this one, it's got 180,000 miles on it, so it might be the better option. We'll see, but I want to pull that before we get rid of this car, just so that way we have a backup, because it's just gears, so we should be able to fix it, right? So we'll get on to the next step.